So today's session is how to avoid critical mistakes in UX to keep your users coming back. So I hope that you're not here for the flight to LA, but this is all about UX today. Here's my LinkedIn profile. You're probably not too interested in that. What you may be interested in is how I got here. Who here has worked at a gas station? Anybody here work at a gas station? All right, that's where I started my career, working at a gas station, pumping gas. So you know how old I am. Back in those days, they had full service, and I used to ask, what kind of gas you want, want your windshields washed and so forth. And what I learned about that, in terms of how I got here, was about customer service, and really thinking about the user or the customer and what they want, and trying to exceed their expectations. I found that if I also washed the back windshield or wiped down the headlights, maybe I would get an extra 25 cents. Not bad for a 15-year-old kid. Then I went to work for McDonald's. And who here has worked at McDonald's? No, not too many. Okay, so what I learned at McDonald's was all about consistency and branding. Of course, I first washed the toilets, and then I actually got promoted. I was able to make breakfast. Probably my most rewarding experience was working in a shopping mall at one of those kiosks in the center of the mall. And what I did was I worked at what we sold dried fruits and nuts and candies and things like that. And I would yell out into the mall, I would say, "Try a banana chip," right? And so I had some really valuable UX lessons there. The first lesson was that placement of things is really important. So, you might want to place, the cheaper banana chips next to the cashews, right? Our goal was to sell more pistachios and cashews, but we wanted to get those guys into the store with banana chips. And so we were willing to give banana chips away for free in order to sell more cashews. So this is all UX, right? So why are you here? I've asked a couple of you guys in the audience why you're here today, and I hope that you came here to learn something about UX. UX lessons are all around us. I was recently in China, and I thought about, I was thinking about my talk today, and I thought, wow, what kind of lessons here are there for us? Does anybody have any idea what kind of lessons we can learn from this in terms of UX? Don't everybody raise your hand at once, no? Okay, so, we want to keep things clean. We want people to be able to find things very easily, right? So there's UX lessons in our everyday lives. So today I'm going to cover all this stuff here, not necessarily in order. It's really tough to cover things in the correct order because there really is not much of an order, right? Yet when you do UX, you have to think about everything from an end user's point of view, and because all end users are different, they might not think the way that you do. They may come from a different angle, a different background. Maybe they work for a bank, and bankers think like this, right? So, they may have a different point of view. So I'll talk a little bit about some design principles, as well as really understanding the user deeply. And that's what I had to do at the gas station, right? I had to really think about who they were. Were they old, right? Old people, they think differently than young folks. And then, how can we apply UX principles to our daily lives? So, some of you were asking me earlier if I had given this talk before, and yes, I have. This talk is really long. It's meant to be an hour, and I'm compressing it to 30 minutes. So, normally I make it very interactive, but like the guy said this morning in the keynote, most of the time I'm going to be talking to you. I hope that you do ask questions, though. If you really have a burning question, we can answer it. So the first thing is, UX and its importance. I think UX has really come to the forefront, and usability has really come to the forefront. Why? Because business models have changed, right? So we don't go to Office Depot and buy Microsoft Office anymore and bring it home and have a $500 investment right? We bring it home, and I really don't like it. I wish I had bought, WordPerfect, right? It doesn't work that way. We just say, okay, I don't like it. I'm going to switch. That's what we do today, right? And we can either switch for free, or we can just pay, $10 a month or something like that. So what that does is create a different expectation of quality, a different expectation of user experience for the end users. I think what's important to look at here is that 90% of people start a task on one device and maybe end it on another device. How many people look at things on your mobile phone, look to buy something, or maybe research, or maybe fill your cart, but you don't actually buy anything until you get back home to your desktop? I mean, how many people do that? I know I do, right? So what does this mean for us? This means that our experience has to be integrated across web and mobile devices. Just like in Netflix, when you're watching a movie on one device and you stop it there and you go to another device, you want it to be right at that same spot where you stopped the movie, right? So this kind of experience has to go across devices, across all platforms that we're working in. Just some ideas of things that people are doing with a mobile phone, tons of things here. Mobile's becoming really important. I know that this is kind of a web conference, but mobile web, it's all really moving together. And mobile and web and IoT, the interfaces, like I said, are really together, and we have to provide an integrated UX for that. How many people here have one of those fitness devices, right? Yeah, and your fitness device has three things, right? You have the device itself, you got your phone, right? Syncing with it, collecting data from it, and so forth. And then you also can look at information on the web. So three things, three applications, multiple tasks that a user is trying to do. You're going to do different things on the web interface than you want on your phone, and you do different things on the actual device, right? So in thinking about UX, we have to think about how to provide that contiguous experience. And to do that, we really have to understand users deeply. What are they doing? What are their tasks? Who are they? Right? And so what is context? Anybody have any ideas, different areas of context? Well, here's just some basic ones, right? We're doing certain things, so we're moving around. We're in different places. We're with different people, right? Maybe it's a Friday or a Saturday, maybe a Monday. We do different things on different days, as well as different times of the day. So you have to think about, they talk about big data, right? So what part of big data is useful for you as a developer, as a designer, to make the user experience better? Sometimes, like for Facebook, maybe it's valuable for them to show you what friends you have around you, right? If you're developing another application, what kind of things are valuable for your users in the application and the data that's coming in so that you can enhance the user experience. Right? So I often wonder this. Why is it that people want to share what they ate today, or show pictures of what they eat on Facebook, or friends hanging out together? Why is it that people want to share this? Anybody have any good answers for that? Okay, well, I'm going to come down and call on somebody. Anybody have any good answers for that? No? Okay. It's because we want to be closer together, right? We want to trust each other. We want to feel part of a community. And that's really a big part of UX. It's not just the buttons and where they are and the color of the buttons, although that's very important, but also the connectivity across devices and across with each other. And one of the big parts of UX is being able to anticipate and satisfy our users. And how do we do that? By knowing more about them, by knowing more about what they want, about what they're doing, who they're with, and so forth. And so we have this definition here. I like this definition. It comes from ISO 25010, and it's really old. But really, it's kind of like the Bible. You can interpret it and grab little nuggets out of it, right? And one of the nuggets that I got out of it was, in order to satisfy, we have to do these things. And one of the things that drives pleasure is being listened to. If somebody listens to you, you feel that, you feel good, right? And so we can do this by anticipating and understanding and showing our users that we understand them. And it's not about trying to sell them stuff and be creepy, right? Applications can be creepy. I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. So we don't want to do that. But we do want to show our users that we're listening to them. Here's an example where it comes up with recommendations based on what I bought. And you can see the kind of things I look at, right? But also it talks about, it helps me to really feel like I'm part of this, right? I'm part of this community, I'm contributing. Here's me ordering a beer in China recently. I showed you that other picture. And the one thing that really gets me about China, that really bothers me, is that when I go and order a beer, firstly, they never bring a napkin, and they never bring a glass. You have to ask for it, right? So it would be great if they were to anticipate what I wanted and give that to me. But what would be even better is if I was sitting there, they give me a beer, and I just 5 seconds later, I'm looking around, and all of a sudden somebody comes and says, "Here, sir, here's a napkin and a glass." Right at that moment, providing what I wanted, making me think that they're really paying attention to me, right? And we can do that in our interfaces also. So to satisfy our users, we really have to anticipate what they want and who they are. Oops, wrong. Missing requirement. Oh, yeah, here's an instance of being creepy, right? So I was just looking at, when that big Ebola thing happened, I was looking, okay, what's going on with Ebola? And I got this thing about missing requirements, I'm thinking to myself, well, gee, I must have gone to some software site or something like that. And it's like, why would they want to push themselves on me when I'm thinking about Ebola? That's terrible. So pretend you're the user. Pretend you're the user and think about what it is that your users want to see. What information do they want? Let's see. Okay, this gets back into thinking about their goal, right? Okay, here's another definition from ISO, and it's kind of part of the Bible, the UX Bible, I call it. And thinking about, what is the user role? It's more than just thinking about user personas, right? We have to think about what they're doing, who they are. Different people do different things. Different people like different things. Different people think different things, right? And we have a context of use. So you may have a user that does one thing in one certain situation with different people around them, or maybe they had just bought something. And so you need to think about who your users are and what their goals are. So not everybody wants to buy something, right? Sometimes they just want to research. And how can you provide a different experience for them when they want to buy something versus when they're just browsing around and looking at something? If they're browsing around looking at something, do you always want to push buy? Maybe not. So in thinking about tasks, there's many types of tasks to think about. One, open-ended, directed, very specific, and so forth. So when you think about your users, think about the different types of tasks that they want to do. And if you're not involved with that, just ask. Getting back to mobile, some tasks are very suited for mobile, right? So what kind of tasks are those? Things with a deadline. Maybe you have to pay a bill very quickly. Maybe you're out and you forgot that it was your wife's birthday and you want to send some flowers. Very timely kind of things that can be done very quickly. Maybe some news, right? Or maybe, you want to use your mobile because you want to be private, right? You want to step out, you don't want anybody to see you, those kind of things. So here's tasks that are not suited for mobile, right? We have things that have many, many steps. Things that have many, many steps are not suitable for mobile, which leads us to the other situation, which is how can we provide that kind of contiguous experience for our users on the web when they switch from one interface to another interface, right? How do we provide that experience? Now let's talk a little bit about what I consider the ultimate user experience is having a user trust us. And trust is a big word, right? It's very big. When you talk about trust, most people say, yeah, you start thinking about, your wife or your friends or maybe some coworkers that you worked with for 10 years or something like that. But how can we really instill trust in our users? I think that's really going to differentiate us in the next decade in our applications and the software that we develop is if our users trust us. And our software is really becoming our store, right? So what kinds of things can you think about when you walk into a store and you talk to a salesperson? What kinds of things make you trust them or that company or that brand versus things that make you not trust them? Very simple things, right? So if the salesman is, maybe they talk too fast, right? Okay, so that's too much information. Maybe they're not very clear about what they're trying to sell. Maybe they're putting pressure on you, right? So those kinds of things, we can just take those directly out of our personal interaction of a brick and mortar interface and transport it directly into our software. We want to be clear. We want to be unambiguous. We don't want to have delays, right? And so I'll go back to this trust factor here. And, what is trust and how can we create it? Two ways I'd like to highlight here in terms of how to create trust. The first one is understandability. I mentioned that just a minute ago about a salesman trying to sell to you, and they're not very clear. They don't present the product very well. They don't present the product succinctly, right? And the second thing is the learnability of your application. If your application is too complicated to learn, then that leads to distrust, right? If you can't learn something, you're just going to get rid of it. Here are some examples, that I just see in my daily life. I noticed that, for instance, on Kaiser, they put my whole username there. Whereas Fidelity, they only put part of it, which I thought was cool. That makes me feel like they're really taking care of my information. They know that, hey, Phil might lose his phone, and we want to help him, right? Nobody likes lawyer talk. Whenever you see a big contract with lots of stuff, you say, oh, geez, And maybe that also leads to distrust. If you have simple language, that leads to trusting. Look at this one here. We respect your privacy. Nothing will be shared until you say so. That's pretty simple, isn't it? Here's another one. Don't give users the creeps. Ask permission. So basic UX principles are just the beginning. Here's a list of stuff here in terms of things you need to think about. I'm not going to go through all of them because we only have 30 minutes. Remember, I compressed the talk into 30 minutes from an hour. I'll talk about a couple things very quickly. We want to reduce the cost of typing. If we were in a UX class, we'd talk about that in detail. But you know the gist. One thing I'd like to talk about is the deletion of defaults, enabling the user to delete defaults very easily. One thing I don't hate more than pressing the delete key to get rid of a default, right? That's silly. Widget entry. We want things to be very simple, right? And consistent in sizing. And then we have de facto standards. De facto standards, think about what your competition is doing and think about different domains. So you want to think about what your domain is doing versus what other domains are doing. You don't want to copy the de facto standards from a banking application, right? Search. This gets back to task. Think clearly and carefully about what your users are going to be searching for and what kind of instances they're going to be searching. Big difference between browsing, filtering, sorting, and searching. So think about those different tasks that they're going to be executing when they're doing those things. And most important, I think, is error handling. Here's an instance where I was looking for Autodesk, and I typed in Auto SSK. You can see it. Oh, just not found. I think that's silly. You should offer the user help if they make a mistake. So you might end up with a list of criteria that you devise and go through your application and evaluate it. Error handling, results, auto-completion, those kinds of things. Navigation, sorry, we're not going anywhere today because we don't have much time. But I will mention here that you can see that I talked about de facto standard a minute ago. You can see that in the mobile world, the de facto standard menu bar at the bottom is becoming very, very standardized, right? So even though you may have a cooler way of doing it, because users expect this, it may not be so cool what your great design is. Again, a lot of people talk about minimizing clicks, but don't do it randomly. Think clearly about the task that they're trying to do first. I'm going to go over some examples later about display and visibility. So here's kind of a summary. Basically, it says think about coloring. Think about who your users are. Maybe they have bad eyesight. If you develop stuff for AARP, maybe you might have a different thinking for your user group than you have for if you're developing a game, right? If you're designing something for people in a factory application, maybe you might want to think about the light in a factory. Or maybe you might want to think about the typical workers in a factory. Let's step through a couple of examples really quick here. Here's an example of placement of that button. So it's clear they want you to apply. Sorry that it's kind of fuzzy here. They want you to apply for a MasterCard, right? But it's really difficult to see that because of the color. So the color of the button is really, really important if you want to have somebody do something. Color creates emphasis, right? Here's an example here where they did a pretty good job at it. Obviously, they want me to create an account. That's very obvious, and it's very easy to see. I know that after you get out of this session, you'll start seeing applications with a different view. You say, oh, gee, I see that yellow there, right? Obviously, they want to, this button still stands out. Even amongst all that information, this button still stands out. Second thing is, don't overuse color. Look at this here. Terrible. Nice colors, though. So let me go through here. So here's another example of color. So they obviously want you to do something. They make it very clear for you to see what they want you to do. Using size and color together can be done as well. So you can see that to get started now, it's pretty clear that they want you to do that, but that's pretty small, right? Here's another one. They're using 2 different colors, which I think is cool. They want maybe 2 different things that they want you to do. Here you can see they've varied it, and they made the green one bigger. So they're both important, but they want you to do this one. I talked about goals and tasks and things that you want your user to do and driving your users towards a certain behavior. Here's an example of share or buy me, right? Same size, same color, probably not a good idea. Here's an example of some simple colors. Think about your users, what they respond to, what they can see well and what they can't see well. Thinking about where they are, right? If they're in a dimly lit environment or not. Again, you see the bar at the bottom, which is kind of becoming a standard. And you can see how this task here is very, very simple. They don't want you to do all kinds of stuff on this screen. Less is more, sometimes. So what would you say could be improved about this screen? Maybe, anybody have any ideas? No? Maybe maybe I could highlight some different things based on what my knowledge is of where they were, right? That's context. Remember, we want to think about the needs at hand. What are we trying to, if we're developing a mobile app and we're having a mobile app and a web app being married together, what do we want them to be able to accomplish on a mobile app versus the web app? Who are they? What are they doing? Things like that. So if you have an accounting application, and you have different levels of approval, what kinds of things are the different levels of approval going to be doing, and where are they going to be, and what devices are they going to be using? Now just some examples in our daily lives. I only have 3 minutes here. Okay. I have, who here has a smartwatch or a Fitbit or something like that? Just about everybody, right? Yeah. I looked at my Garmin a couple days ago, and I was thinking to myself, how can I improve this? And so the Garmin lets you have 4 different faces plus the time. So I thought, okay. I started thinking about my tasks. What are my tasks? What kind of situations am I in that I want to do and see things, right? And so I thought, okay, I want to see overall status. That's one task. That's one situation. So on this screen, I'm going to change it to average speed, total distance, heart rate, and cadence. Then maybe I'm doing a cadence, what I call a cadence interval. Sometimes I want to practice my spin on my bicycle, right? So I want to look at things like the average cadence, the current cadence, how long I've been doing it, a lap time. So this is going to be for me, right? And then maybe, I'm doing a power where I really want to work hard and really push a big gear. So maybe I have heart rate because I'm concerned about that when I'm doing that. Current speed, things like that. And then maybe I'm doing a climbing interval where I'm climbing a hill for a minute and I want to really measure some things. So these are different situations, different things we can use when we're programming our wearables, different ways we can use actually usability in our own lives. So I would think about how do I want to group information, the timing of information, the position of the information. I'm going to put speed always in the upper left. So I know when I'm riding my bike and I go like that, like look at the computer, I know exactly where to go look for it. And the same thing we can do in our applications that we build. We want to make the user, let them know exactly where something is going to be all the time. That's called consistency. So, I've got 2 minutes here. Here's what we've covered today. I think we did this. We talked about tasks. We talked about context, right? One more story. Quick story here. Who here has visited their high school teacher or their elementary school teacher since you grew up? Well, this is my high school teacher. His name is Mr. Larson. And I went back and saw Mr. Larson, you can see back in 2014. And I said, Mr. Larson, I just want to tell you that I remember this lesson that you taught me. And he's like, really? What? He's like 75 years old. And I said, really? And I said, yeah, one time in class you were giving out our homework. And one of the students said, Mr. Larson, that's not fair. That's not fair. Mr. Greer already gave us homework, and we had homework yesterday from you. And Mr. Larson, how teachers are always fumbling around with their papers at the end. Mr. Larson stood up right away and he went, And he said, when you were born, did the doctor pick you up like this and say, life is fair, life is fair, life is fair? He said, no, he didn't do that. Do your homework. And after I told Mr. Larson this, he said, well, if that's all you remember from all my classes, he said, that's still pretty good, because that's a really important one. So I know that I could never live up to be Mr. Larson, but I hope that you did learn something today, and that's it. So thanks very much.